In this video, we are trying to bring back some mojo to your spinners. So let's dig in. Salut, Greg here for French Touch. Thanks very much for tuning into the channel. Hope you're well. Today we're talking about the good old spinner. And let's face it straight up, until very recently, you would not even have found one in my tackle box. I would rather use a hard body lure or a soft plastic way before I would use an inline spinner, just because I'm a pushy tackle nerd, I guess. But very recently, I discovered a bait made by a brand in France called Morpho Fishing that take its inspiration from the Japanese market, the Northern American market, combined and improved on their design to produce a bait that completely changed my mind about inline spinner. It is a bait that is packed full of features, extremely technical, and so much fun to use. So let me show you what the Morpho Mojo looks like. So let's have a closer look on how that thing is built. On the top of the bait, we're going to find a swivel that is directly mounted onto the shaft. Then we have the blade, which is a willow-shaped blade that is also directly mounted onto the shaft without clevis. Then a couple of beads. Then we have the body of the bait, or the sinker, that has a very specific shape and is painted. And on the business end, we have a split ring and a treble hook, both premium component from Van Hook. So straight away, we can definitely know where the inspiration to create that bait come from. But what distinguishes that bait from the other one that look like it on the market? And to answer that question, we have to go down to the detail. And we're going to start at the blade level. So the blade is directly mounted onto the shaft and has a fairly large hole for the size of the shaft. So the blade of the bait spins very easily. So you can very slow roll the bait close to the bottom and it will spin. You will also notice that the hole in the blade is slightly angled as compared to the plan of the blade. And that has multiple functions. The first one is that it creates a kink at the bottom of the blade that rests onto the two bead, which reduces frictions and improve the rotation speed of the blade. But obviously on the top side of the blade, that creates a little dip, a little pocket, if you'd like, on which the water presses to, and that forces the blade to rotate a little bit more perpendicular to the shaft of the bait. And that has multiple functions. The first obvious one is that the blade doesn't fall back as much onto the body of the bait, so it doesn't hit the bottom of the body. But maybe more interestingly, by forcing the blade out like that, the resistance it creates is actually enough to slightly deflect the bait when it hits a piece of cover. So when you're retrieving the bait, the blade will actually hit that piece of cover, and the resistance that is created on the top side of the blade is actually enough to slightly deflect the bait off the piece of cover. So something that is really amazing when you're using those things that you will notice straight up is that they do not snag. So if you cast it in a branch, it will snag, don't get me wrong. But when you're fishing and you're eating a root, for instance, or a branch under the water, you will more easily come over those snags than if you were using a traditional spinner with a clevis mounted blade, for instance. You do not snag nowhere near as much with a Mojo as you would with a traditional inline spinner, that's for sure. Something that I quickly noticed when I first fished with a Mojo is that they do not tangle nowhere near as much as a traditional inline spinner, especially those with a clevis mounted blade. And I asked the designer at Morpho to explain to me how they make that possible. And he explained to me that the dip on the top side of the blade, the hole in the blade, and the size of the swivel are actually all matched. So when the bait enters the water, the blade comes and locks itself against the top swivel. And that creates a parachute effect that prevents the bait to flip on itself and you hook to grab your line when the bait enters the water. Just found that brilliant. But there's more to that. When the bait enters the water and the blade is pushed up in that position, because of the shape of the weight and the position of the blade and the slight angle the blade takes, the bait is actually pushed backwards, so it sinks away from you. And that's very impressive when you're pitching your bait right on the edge of a piece of cover or an overhanging bank, for instance. Your bait will actually sink underneath the cover. And we all know that's probably where the better fish are. So that thing will definitely give you an edge to trigger those bigger fish that are lurking underneath the piece of cover. One of the most obvious features of the Mojo is the shape of the weight. The weight is designed to move the center of gravity of the bait as far towards the back as possible. And that for two reasons. The first one is that it helps with the sinking phase that we just talked about. It helps the bait swimming or sinking away from you. But also because the weight is spinning freely around the shaft of the bait, it always stays belly down. And what that creates is a quill effect that stabilizes the bait on the retrieve and prevent it to actually flip on the side all the time. A little hidden feature of that belly staying down like that all the time is that when the bait hits a piece of cover, if the blade was not enough to actually deflect the bait off the cover, the belly will definitely hit that piece of cover and help with the snagless capability of the bait, which is pretty awesome. And finally, on the business end, the hook is mounted directly onto the split ring that allows you to change your hook right out of the gate. If you want to put a single, a barbless single at the back of that bait, you can do it straight up out of the box. You don't have to cut the hook, add a split ring, and add a hook. You can do it right out of the box. So there you have it. That was a bit of an in-depth review of the Morpho Mojo, and to be fair, I am the very first surprised by how long I can talk about that little guy. But really, the features and the technicity that goes into that bait are absolutely outstanding. If you like this video, please do the usual YouTube thing, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I will leave some links down below for videos we made a couple of months ago using the Mojo to target trout in small streams. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to leave them in the comment section down below and I will answer them as soon as I can. We'll see you in the next one. Salut!